Tonight to Holy Wednesday. Holy Wednesday. We are making our way. We are making the turn. We are almost ready to go up the hill, up the hill as we approach Good Friday, what we call Good Friday, but we know it was a whole lot of things that were going on that were not so good. But we call it Good Friday. Why? Because we know that Friday is not the end of the story. That Friday is not the end of the story. Welcome. As you are coming in, would you please like, share, tag, bring somebody in if you are finding value. Now listen, I don't want you to bring somebody in where you are not finding value, but if you find value in this space, would you bring somebody in? Put a name in the comment. Let them know that you are trying to get their attention to bring them over to this space. I am Chaplain Sherry, Coach Sherry. I am your community pastor, Sherry. I am Sherry from the 800 block of Mooney Avenue, and it is so good to be here. It is so good to be here. Our testimony is that millions didn't make it, but we are one of the ones who did, and since we are here, we want to give God all that belongs to God. We understand that if we had 10,000 tongues, I'll tell you, I am on a high today. After finishing my defense on Saturday and then getting my robe today, did I act up? I got a video circulating out there in these social media streets because I wanted to allow you who have been on this journey with me to continue to be in. I asked you to pray, so now this is the result of our prayers. So tonight is Holy Wednesday. Now remember that Thursday night, Monday, Thursday will be our last time gathering because Friday we're going to just be all over the place in listening to the 7 last sayings, the 7 words. They will be all through these social media streets. They will be in person, so you cannot miss them. Some will start at 12 noon. Some will be at night. So wherever you stumble, you will find, I'm sure that you will find a word. You will find a word. I will be virtually preaching with the Gathering, a womanist church out of Dallas, Texas. Dr. Irie Session and Dr. Camilla are the pastors. So I'm excited to be doing the 6th word. It is finished. It is finished. But tonight, before we get there, we have to talk about the betrayed Jesus. we have to talk about the betrayed Jesus. We all know the story. So I want to look at this by asking 3 questions tonight. I want to ask 3 questions, but before that, I want us to look at the biblical text where this story is situated. It is in Matthew 26:14 through 16, and I am reading from the NRSVUE, right? That's the New Revised Standard Version, updated edition. So it says, then one of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what will you give me if I betray him to you? They paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, he began to look for an opportunity to betray him. That's the Matthew version. The Luke version says, now the festival of unleavened bread, which is called the Passover, was near. The chief priests and the scribes were looking for a way to put Jesus to death, for they were afraid of the people. Then Satan entered into Judas, called Iscariot, who was one of the 12. He went away and conferred with the chief priests and officers of the temple police about how he might betray him to them. They were greatly pleased and agreed to give him money. So he consented and began to look for an opportunity to betray him to them when no crowd was present. Now, I want us to look at who is Judas, what did Judas do, what are the consequences of the actions that Judas took. Who is Judas? So we talk about him all the time, but who is he? We just call him Judas of Iscariot, right? Who betrayed Jesus? So every time you see his name in the list, it is always added who betrayed Jesus, right? So he is known by his act. There are some people who we know by their act. We have to, if somebody say, well, you know Sherry. No, I don't know Sherry. Yes, you do. You know Sherry from the 800 block of Mooney Avenue, right? Or Rahab. I don't know no Rahab. Yes, you do. Rahab the harlot, right? So every time we see Rahab's name, it is always associated with what she did. With Judas, it is always associated with what he did. The woman at the well, right? We don't know her name, but we know she had 5 husbands, right? We know she had 5 husbands. So we often associate people with what they have done. And it doesn't matter if they no longer do that. It doesn't matter if they haven't done that in years. We always find a way to associate them with what they did or their condition, like the woman with the issue of blood, right? And, we seem to especially always do it with women, right? We are quick to say Rahab the harlot, Rahab the prostitute, but we very seldom say that about David. So we can say David the adulterer, David the rapist. You see where I'm going? We tie especially women to their conditions, and we give passes to those men that we like, men like David. Oh, he's David after God's own heart. He's David, the greatest king. but he is also David the rapist. He is also David the adulterer. And so here it is, Judas is known by his name, by what he did. But his name, catch this. Now, this here is this is wow. This is wow. His name, Judas, comes from Judah, which equals praise. Did you catch that? His name is Judas, which is rooted in Judah, which means praise. This man, whose name gives the connotation of praise, does what we would consider the unthinkable thing. I want us to think about that. I want us to think about that because oftentimes we say that in our after the world text, right, that he wasn't really saved, right, that he really didn't love Christ, that he had never really bought into this message that Christ was bringing. I want us to think about that. I want us to think about that a little bit. I'm not trying to change your mind about it. I am trying to offer another way of looking at the human condition or the human experience. So his name is Cariot, but it is a man of Cariot, which signifies where he's from. So his name is Cariot is not necessarily his last name, but it signifies where he is from. And this place, Cariot of Moab, is east of the Jordan. It is east of the Jordan. It is also known as Hazor. But I think there's something to this with his name giving off the connotation of praise. Perhaps we've never thought of that before because we just pigeonhole him as being the one who betrayed Jesus. But my question tonight is, can there be both? Can they be both? And I want you to think about your own life where you may have done something or you may be into something, but you still have a heart for God. Sherry, you're reaching tonight. I just want you to think about your own life. I want you to think about your own life. That this person, Judas, is really more than, yes, he did what we could never fathom doing, is betraying someone who is close to us, someone that we love. But here's what I want to suggest tonight. We can never say what we will not do. We can only say what we have not done yet. We cannot say what we will never do. All we can say is what we have not done yet. So what is it that Judas did? What did Judas do? Judas conspired with the Jewish leaders. So remember, all of this ties together that when Jesus went into the temple, he overturned some tables. Yes, Jesus is angry with the ones who are cheating the people, the merchants, but he's also angry with the religious leaders. He is also angry with the religious leaders who has turned the temple, who has turned the worship place into a vile space, a place of cheating, a place of stealing, a place of conniving. And Jesus is upset with the religious leaders, which is why in Matthew 23, he goes up against them. He is not talking to the merchants when he tells them, you sit in Moses' seat. It's like Jesus always saying, I got to give it to you. You know the law. Knowing the law is not your problem. But what is happening is you are placing heavy yoke. You are placing a heavy burden on the people who could least afford it. And you are making them do things that you yourself will not do. You are making them go over and beyond what is required of them for your own selfish gain. And so after Jesus does this and he tells them this, he calls them hypocrites. He's upset, yes, with the merchants who are cheating the people and charging them excessive fees for to exchange their money. But he's also angry with the religious leaders who have gotten in cahoots with Rome and are oppressing God's people. And so after Jesus comes through the temple like a wild man, the religious leaders, they wanted to know whose authority, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? And they began to conspire and try to figure out how they're going to take Jesus down. And so perhaps after looking and trying to find someone, they stumble upon Judas. And Judas takes the bait. Judas takes the bait. But guess what? It did not catch Jesus off guard. It did not catch Jesus off guard. Let's see if I got this right. Even when Jesus in John 6:64 says, well, let me just start with 60. John 6:60 that says, when many of his disciples heard it, they said, this teaching is difficult. Who can accept it? But Jesus, being aware of his disciples were complaining about it, said to them, does this offend you? Then what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? It is the spirit that gives life. The flesh is useless. The words that I have spoken to you are spirit and life. But among you, there are some who do not believe. For Jesus knew from the first who were the ones that did not believe, and who was the one that would betray him. Even after knowing that this was going to go down, Jesus did not remove Judas from the table. Jesus did not remove Judas from his job. Judas was the treasurer. He held the bag. So it did not catch Jesus by surprise that this was going to take place. And then there's a point that Jesus let Judas know that he knew what was going to take place. Let's look at John 13, 18 through 26. John 13, 18 through 26. That says, this is John 13, 18 through 26. Says, I'm not speaking of all of you. I know whom I've chosen. But it is to fulfill the scriptures. The one who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. I tell you this now before it occurs, so that when it does occur, you may believe that I am he. Verily, verily, I tell you, whoever receives one whom I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. Verse 21. After saying this, Jesus was troubled and declared, verily, verily, I tell you, one of you will betray me. The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he was speaking. One of his disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter therefore motioned to him and to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. So while reclining next to Jesus, he asked, Lord, who is it? Jesus answered, it is the one to whom I give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish. So when he had dipped the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. After he received the piece of bread, Satan entered into him. Jesus said to him, do quickly what you are going to do. So Jesus knew, and he let Judas know that he knew that it was going to be Judas. So Jesus tells him, listen, if you're going to do this, go ahead on and do it. And so we find that this is exactly what he did. This is exactly what Judas did. He betrayed Jesus with a kiss. He betrayed Jesus with a kiss. And I'm going to read John 18, 2 through 5. John 18, 2 through 5. After Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place because Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas brought a detachment of soldiers together with police from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that was to happen to him, came forward and asked, whom are you looking for? They answered, Judas, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus replied, I am he. Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. So Jesus knows what's going to take place. And he tells Judas, Go ahead on and do it. If you're going to do this, do it quickly. There are times when Holy Spirit, when the intuition, if it's through a dream or other ways that God speaks, God will let us know who among us is not necessarily for us. God, through the Holy Spirit, whether it comes through a dream, whether it comes through an ancestor, whether it comes through a sage, God will show us who is around us so that we are not caught off guard when they get to acting crazy. So Jesus knows all of this. And he let Judas know that he knows. So what is a betrayer? What is a betrayer? What does it mean for one to be betrayed? A betrayer is one who exposes one's country, group, or person to danger by treacherously giving information to an enemy. Let me read this again. A betrayer is one who exposes one's country, group, or person to danger by treacherously giving information to an enemy. And I have in bold and black want, meaning that the betrayer exposes one that is close to him. The betrayer is not betrayal if the person is not in your circle. If you don't have an intimate knowledge or intimate relationship with them, you cannot be betrayed by the enemy. Betrayal only happens within your circle. It can only happen within your circle. It is not going to be someone who does not care about you, who does not have, but a betrayer has intimate knowledge about you, about your moves, about your dreams, about your hopes, about your aspirations, about your strengths and your failures. That's how close that person is. And so when the text says, the biblical text in the Greek, it means to hand over, to give over someone who is close to you to an enemy. To hand over. Judas handed over Jesus to the enemy. I don't know if you've ever been betrayed. I don't know if you trusted somebody and they were in your circle, they were in your clique, they were in your crew. You ran together, you hung out together, you went to eat together, you drank together, whatever it is that you did it together. They were in your circle. They were not an enemy. That's why one of the texts says, and it may have been David. I can't remember if you're listening and you got it. But you'll know the story that says, I could take it if it was my enemy. I can take this betrayal. I can take this action against me if it was my betrayal, but it was somebody that was in my camp. It was somebody who was a friend. It was somebody who was close to me. And so the enemy had to get next to someone who had intimate knowledge about Jesus's whereabouts, about the moves that Jesus made. And Judas is the one who handed over. He's the one that handed over Jesus to the enemy. Well, then the question is then, why would he do this? Why would Judas betray Jesus? What is it that will cause Judas, to hand over somebody that he has been with for 3 years, walked with, ate with, saw the miracles? Judas was one of the inner circle, but he was among the 12. So he had traveled with Jesus. He had seen the highs and lows of Jesus. Why would he betray Jesus? And we have Judas is our point of departure tonight, but let's put our own name in there. Why would we betray somebody that was close to us? What would cause us? Was Judas jealous of the other disciples? Was he jealous of Peter, James, and John because they were in the inner circle? Every time Jesus wanted to do something major, he took Peter, James, and John with him. Ha! Why is it that Judas betrayed Jesus? Was he jealous of the other disciples? Let me tell you, I have sense enough to know that everybody who's in my circle is not excited for sharing. I got sense enough, Pastor Angie, to know that everybody who puts a like or a heart on my social media posts of how I've been sashaying and excited for myself of completing this doctoral degree with no hiccups and no disruptions and completing. Everybody is not happy with me or for me. Some people like stuff on our social media posts because it helps them to keep up to see what other people are doing. And yes, Pastor Angie, are jealous of Jesus himself. All this attention, he's seeing Jesus heal the sick, raise the dead, turn water into wine. How many times do we get jealous of people who are up front, who has the microphone? They have the outs, or everybody is calling their names. I don't know why they calling her name all the time. I don't know why she posting pictures of herself all the time. I'm just talking about what I'm talking about tonight. And so in order to, when people can't not come up to your level, they'll do what they need to do to bring you down to a place that they can comprehend. We're just gonna bring you down. How many times, Joyce, when we see basketball players or people who are in sports, they come out of the hood, they're making good, and they go back to the hood, and their friends, come on, man, come go riding with me. Next thing you know, the basketball star, the football star is now in trouble because they got, oh, you think you're too good for us now? You don't want to go hang out? I know what I'm talking about. So perhaps Judas was zealous of the disciples or even Jesus. Or perhaps he was offended by Jesus' rebuke because Jesus called him out. Perhaps he was just angry because, or offended because Jesus said, look, you're the one I dipped this bread in. Yeah, you are the one. And if you're going to do it, go ahead on and do what you got to do. Perhaps he got upset. His feelings got hurt. So he's going to bring Jesus down. Or perhaps he's trying to force Jesus' hand for some reason, cause Jesus to do something that he wanted. It's all kinds of ways. I'm just looking at the human condition. I'm looking at, scripture says that, and even in the John text that we talked about, in the John text that we talked about, that I lost that train of thought just that quick. Jesus calls him out. And perhaps he just wants to get him back. Oh, I know what I'm talking about. I'm sorry. I'm talking about the prophecy. Even though Jesus talked about this had to take place, I'm talking about tonight the human condition. I'm talking about as humans, and Judas is a human, right? These are the things that happen. And perhaps he's embittered because Jesus had not set up an earthly kingdom, right? Because remember, those among the Judeans, they were looking for a earthly king. They were looking for a Messiah who would save them, who would destroy the systems and the practices of Rome. And they were looking for Jesus to come as the conquering king. And Jesus has not done that. And so perhaps Judas is saying, look, I've been following you. I've been going after you, and you ain't done nothing yet. I've been giving you all my money. I've been giving you all my time, and you ain't done nothing what I thought you were going to do. And then just perhaps is greed. Just perhaps he was not content with what he had. He was the treasurer. He had a high-ranking position in the church. Yet he was not satisfied. And so he betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Perhaps he just wanted more. He was not satisfied. Oh, come on now. We putting Judas' name, and my God, I think about, I don't know if you guys have seen the Shirley Chisholm movie, the one on the Regina King put out. I mean, God, it took me 3 times to look at it. But it was somebody in her circle who had promised her something and then did not, somebody got to him. Somebody got to him, and I just got to believe, I'm going to use my sanctified imagination, Pastor Angie. I'm going to use my sanctified imagination, Pastor Tracy, that it was money exchanged. Behind the doors, it was money exchanged. And out of greed, perhaps, this person betrayed Shirley. And then Judas could have just been scared. It could have been simply fear. It's not too late to share this, by the way. It's not too late to bring somebody in. Put their name in the comment section. If they don't catch it now, they can come back and get it. Perhaps he was just afraid. Listen, you got to remember that these disciples who were following Jesus, they had no rank. They didn't come from high social classes, high economics. They were a bunch of scraggly men who Jesus says, come follow me. And they take him up and do that. Perhaps Judas was no match against these high-ranking religious leaders who has all of this that they have at their disposal, because even the high religious leaders were in bed with Rome. And so just perhaps he was scared. Have you ever been so afraid that your back was against the wall? And out of fear, you made a decision that you said that you would never make. Put your own name. Why did I do that? Because as humans, there are times in our lives when the right situation will come along and the wrong one will come along, and we will do things out of fear. So I have grace for Judas. I have grace for Judas. In any one of these things, whether it was jealousy, whether he was offended, whether he was trying to force Jesus' hand, whether he was upset because Jesus had not set up an earthly kingdom, whether it's not being content with what he had, or whether it was out of fear, I can offer grace because I have seen myself in any one of these things. Grade your own paper tonight. Grade your own paper. So I want us to end with this. And this is something that we don't often talk about when we talk about Judas. What was the consequences of his actions? Matthew 27 and 3 through 10 says, when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he repented and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. He said, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. But they said, what is that to us? See to it yourself. Throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, he departed and he went and hanged himself. But the chief priest, taking the pieces of silver, said, it is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since they are blood money. After conferring together, they used them to buy the potter's field as a place to bury foreigners. For this reason, that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah, and they took 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one on whom a price had been set, on whom some of the people of Israel had set a price, and they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord commanded. My God. Judas was remorseful. My God. Judas was remorseful when he saw the actions, what the actions of his betrayal had led to. Now you can say what we want to say, but I see remorse here. The text says he repented. The text says that he repented and he went to take the money back. He tried to undo what he had done, but it was too late. I have grace for Judas tonight. He tried to undo what he had done, but it was too late. He says, I have sinned by betraying the innocent blood. But they said, what is it to us? We don't care about what you're talking about now. We don't care about that. Handle it yourself. And what does he do? He goes and hangs himself. Judas dies by suicide. He dies by suicide. The hurt that overwhelmed him. And in my experience of working with those who have attempted to die by suicide, they didn't complete it, but they come back to say, or they have thoughts of suicide, but they didn't go through with it, but they tell me they wanted to stop the hurt. It wasn't about dying as much as it is about wanting to stop the hurt. And the only way that they feel to stop the hurt is to die. And I could just sense Judas not able to undo what he had done. And he goes and hangs himself. Even when we talk about Peter, there's a point that the text says that Peter wept bitterly about what he had done. So my question tonight, and I just want you to put in the comment section, was Judas redeemable? Was Judas redeemable? We know what he did. We know he died by suicide. But my question is, if he had lived, if he could see further than this act, if he could have found another way to handle the hurt, was he redeemable? Would the work on the cross include Judas too? I need you to put it. I see Pastor Shannon says he repented. Yes, and me too. Yes. Is Judas a part of the all? I can't see. I want to give you a second. Yes or no? Was Judas redeemable? And even because we always say that a person who dies by suicide, they going straight to hell. They, that because it is the unpardonable sin. Well, no, it's really not. Okay, let's see. I got truly would. Yes, I see. Yes, of course he was. He was a whosoever. My God, he was a whosoever. The difference, my God, had we see that Peter was restored. And I just gotta believe that had Judas not died by suicide, if he could have just looked beyond that act, that he would have been restored. That would, just as Jesus had welcomed Peter back, I gotta believe that Judas would have also been welcomed back. Oh, my friends, I'm just here to tell you there is nothing that you could do. There is nothing that you could do that will cause you not to be worthy of redemption. That God stands wide open. That's why I cannot afford not to extend grace to another, because I need that grace every day to come back to me. And so what we have to do as Jesus followers, I'm not worried about you being a Christian. I'm concerned about whether or not you are a Jesus follower. Because if you are a Jesus follower and you believe in the redemptive work of Jesus, if you believe that Jesus came for all, then that means that we cannot afford to determine who's in and who's out. And so I say to you today, whatever it is that you may have done, or whatever it is you may be doing, I don't know why you're doing what you're doing, I want to simply say that you are a part of the all. There's nothing. And I'm going to end with this, that I remember working when I was doing home hospice in Alexandria. I had a patient who worked in Angola. He was a guard, a correction officer. And he went to church, went to Sunday school. He did it all. But he struggled in whether or not he was worthy of heaven. He struggled with whether or not he could be forgiven. And so we went through John 3:16, and he could do all, he can walk the text and he could quote the scriptures, but he could not see himself in the all, and he would never say what it was that he did. For some reason, I'm thinking murder, but he never would voice it. And he died before we could have that next conversation. And every day, I encounter people as they approach death. Even though they have taught it, they have preached it, they have, they have quoted it, they still sometimes struggle with if all applies to them. I want to simply say, with all of the degrees I have found no other definition of all except all. And so tomorrow night will be our final night, and we will be dealing with the Passover. We'll be dealing with the Passover. We'll be dealing with, for us, some call it the Lord's Supper. Some call it the Eucharistic meal. But I want to root that in what Jesus is doing at this meal with his disciples, that they are giving a new meaning to an old tradition. Listen, I pray that you've been blessed. And I also pray that all be well with you. Bye-bye.